Hello everybody and welcome to Against the Fence. This is the regular place to be if you're obsessed and passionate about MMA and the sport of, UFC and the sport of MMA. I'm your host JK as always. Today we're going to be talking about our UFC London insight because we had a few things was mentioned our way during the UFC 286 fight week. So we'll get into a little bit about that. There's a lot of rumours have been going around about a potentially revisit of London for the UFC. So we'll get into that. And we'll also talk about which fights we want to see, including, hopefully, we'll hear some of your thoughts as well. Some of the fights, you might disagree with some of the options that I've given you. If you feel that there's better matchups to be made, feel free to hit in the comments section or in the chat, of course, if you're joining us live. And then, of course, we'll get into maybe a bit of a prediction for the main event of that card. And maybe even touching upon some of the people that won't be featured on that card in July. So it's all rumours for now. Nothing's really been confirmed by the UFC as of yet. But let's just kick things off then of a bit of a timeline, because we were told during that UFC 286 fight week by a source that's very close to Tom Aspinall, basically saying that he is probably most likely going to fight in July in London. An opponent wasn't mentioned, but of course, prior to that fight week, Aspinall was going back and forth with Marcin Tybura on Twitter. He's publicly stated that Tybura is the only option at the moment at heavyweight for him. So all directions are pointing towards Marcin Tybura. Now, last week, Tom said that it may, when in an interview whilst he was training, it may be true, and it could get finalised this week. Now, of course, that was last week. We haven't heard anything this week other than Michael Bisping talking about UFC London on his YouTube channel. And he kind of alluded to the UFC returning to London in July when he was talking about Paddy Pimblett's return. Also, of course, some people have noticed on Twitter is a common theme that the UFC, or should I say Cage Warriors, the UK's promotion, puts on an event at the O2 Indigo the night before a UFC London card, and they've booked a date in Friday, 22nd of July. So our thoughts are that the UFC will probably return on the Saturday, 23rd, and they'll bring a fight night. Now, I must admit, before the UFC 286 fight week, I've been telling people I think the UFC will come back in July. I think they will mirror their calendar similar to what they had last year. Of course, they're still getting over putting events on with a live audience, or a bigger audience, should I say, for fight nights. That's been, since COVID, that's been a slow process. So we're starting to see some improvements. We've also talked about, we haven't talked about, but I mean, in our close-knit community, of course, spoken about potential return to Paris as well in September, as well as a UFC Poland, which would be different as well. In our close-knit community, if you were around us during the UFC 286 fight week, you may have heard us. We probably would have told you the news that Aspinall was going to be potentially headlining a UFC London card. But yeah, I'm pretty much sitting at the moment 90% sure that they're going to return. I'm almost dead certain, because we're ticking boxes. There's more that's come out of just what our source was telling us, and yeah, man, I cannot wait. We're going to get into some top juicy fights that we reckon that will be on that card. Some couple of names, of course. Some of the regulars. There might be a few new ones on there, of course, as well. But let's get to you guys in the chats, of course. Breezy's in the house. He says, morning, as always. And we've got Ash, who says, yes. Breezy says, Tai Tuivasa also said he was getting back to the gym this week. Okay, so that's an interesting one. Maybe there could be a curveball getting thrown in there, of course. It'd be interesting to see if Tuivasa would be game to coming over to the UK. He fought in France last time out. Didn't quite get the nod, of course. and didn't get the victory he wanted against the hometown hero. Big risk again coming over to the UK and fighting someone like Tom Aspinall, in my opinion. Ash says, imagine Ty versus Tom. Ooh, that's even better. Yeah, I think stylistically it's probably a harder matchup than Marcin Tybura. And of course, we're going to get into a prediction and maybe a little bit of a breakdown on Aspinall versus Tybura a little bit later on in the show, so do stay tuned for that. Don't forget to hit a like button on the video if you're super excited for these upcoming events that the UFC are going to bring us later on this summer, of course, and if you're super hyped about the UFC returning to London. Thanks for your chats, guys. Let's get straight into the potential matchups then, shall we? I'll probably list off a few names that I'm expecting to show up on the fight card, and then we'll go through some of their potential opponents. So I reckon Molly McCann will probably make an appearance at UFC London again this time. She's back training, of course, after coming off of that loss against Erin Blanchfield. I think Jai Herbert, bit of a regular now. That's 2-2 in the UFC London, so I reckon he will be back, of course. Jack Shaw, who looked stunning against Amir Khani last time out at the UFC 286. I'd imagine he's going to be back on there as well. Muhammad Makayev, again, another regular. We can't have a UFC London without Muhammad Makayev, unless the UFC decide to put him on pay-per-view, of course, but I don't think they'll do that because of the weight class that he's in. That's weight class politics, in my opinion. Hoping that Nathaniel Wood comes back this time again. Fingers crossed that he's due a return to London, of course. Last year he fought in July and then again in September in Paris. Fell out of that fight against Lerone Murphy, unfortunately. Couldn't make it this time out, but hopefully he'll be back in the summer, excuse me. Then I'm expecting Modestas Bukauskas as well to come back to UFC London. He said it's been his absolute dream when we spoke to him in the Q&A last month. So there's no doubt he's going to be eyeing up that fight card. I can guarantee you 80% sure that he's going to be back for that card. Paul Craig as a good one as well. Got a good fight for him. We may have spoken about before. But yeah, people that I don't think will be in there, of course, you probably have seen as well. Paddy Pimblett, I can't imagine that he will make an appearance. As well as I'm not really too sure that Gunnar Nelson will show up either. My opinions with Gunnar, I think he will most likely be saved for a pay-per-view event. That's my opinion. So let's get into some of these matchups then. So who would we like to see Molly McCann be paired up with then? I've got 3 options for her, the most options, purely because women's flyweight is on fire at the moment, and I think there's some really good matchups for her in this current moment in time. I'd like to see her potentially fight Joanne Wood, and it's probably my most intriguing fight to make. It'd be UK versus Scotland. England versus Scotland, should I say. Joanne Wood coming off that split decision win against Lana Carolina in London this past week. I think both girls have been up and down in the UFC, especially Joanne Wood. You could probably say that Joanne Wood has fought the tougher competition out of the two. She's fought, former champions, of course. She fought Alexa Grasso, which I believe was her last loss. I'm right in saying. I've also got Marina Moroz, the Ukrainian girl. I think she would be a good test for Molly McCann. Just getting it, yeah, Alexa Grasso. But I mean, again, steep for Joanne Calderwood though. She's 1 win in the last 4. It's not looking great. She's lost against Talia Santos. No slouch, of course. Lauren Murphy, who's up there in the division as well. She beat Jessica I, lost against Jennifer Meyer. So she's fallen short. And Molly McCann has slipped out of the flyweight rankings. I'm pretty sure she got put in there. But she's currently not ranked. So, again, I'd imagine Molly's sitting there just outside of the rankings because she just fought Erin Blanchfield. Joanne Wood makes a lot of sense, probably timing-wise and, of course, matchup-wise as well. Ash saying yes, Modestas, of course. Breezy said Maverick. I think Maverick is a good one. I think Miranda Maverick might be booked at the moment, so we'd have to see how that fight takes place. She was calling for the Molly McCann fight. I think it's a good one. It's a good shout, Breezy, for sure. It's not on my list. I think Miranda Maverick is a very strong competitor. A difficult fight for Molly McCann, I think. I think it's more difficult out of the three that I've got. The last one I've got is Irene Lipski as well. She's no slouch either. She's been on tough times. I mean, you could argue and say, JK, you throwing Molly some well, not cans, but some easier fights for her. And okay, maybe there's some level of bias to there as well. Lipski coming off a win though against JJ Aldrich, which I think was a solid win for her. But she did lose to somebody that Molly McCann beat, and that's Priscilla Cochera. But then she beat Mandy Bohm. So, yeah, I mean, some good options there for her as well. But my strongest one, I think, is Joanne Wood. I think it's a close bout, really, between the two. Let's go, says Size in the house, tuning in from work, of course, as well. Breezy saying she's just been booked for June, but would like to see that. Yeah, okay, yeah. So timing wouldn't make sense really on that one, unless Maverick gets a quick finish and is feeling like jumping in there, of course. But who knows? Who knows? This sport of mixed martial arts, that's why we love it so much. It's very hard to predict what's next. I think nobody can sit in this seat right now and categorically say that these are the matchups to make and picking one. But I'm giving you some good ones that I think, in my opinion, make sense. Let's move on to Jai Herbert. Been on the prelims quite recently at UFC London. He's coming off of a draw at the moment to Ludovic Klein. Very close bout. Some thought that he should have got the nod that night and should have got the decision win. But we're not going to see it run back. Got two top picks for Jai Herbert at the moment. My first one's against a veteran in John McDessie. He's been all over the place. He's not fought since September, however. So he could be due to jump in there potentially in June, maybe. I think he's a good test for him. He's well experienced, 18-8 currently as a record. He's coming off of a loss against Nasrat Haqparast, who's somebody who's been sitting just outside of the lightweight rankings. So really, I guess it's a good fight for Jai Herbert. It benefits Jai Herbert more. But he's been around the game as John McDessie. Lost against Francisco Trinaldo. Who's somebody else who beat Jai Herbert. But he's beaten the likes of Ross Pearson, lost to Lando Venera, lost against Donald Cerrone. Again, some good seasoned veterans. So, I think it's a solid test for Jai Herbert and a good test for John McDessie in fighting somebody who's, been a prospect but kind of had a rough time in the UFC. So I think that makes sense in that way. But my other pick for Jai would be Otman Azaitar. Much tougher contest potentially on paper. He is coming off of his first professional loss, and that was against Matt Frevola, and he got knocked out by Matt Frevola. So, it depends. Well, it depends how the UFC view Jai Herbert now, because clearly coming into the organization, they thought that his skill set was very, very good because they gave him someone like Francisco Trinaldo, who is, yes, quite an old lightweight, but he's a veteran and he's a very skilled fighter. So, and he's like, again, someone against Ilia Topuria. Okay, you could argue and say that Ilia Topuria is a prospect as well coming into it. But other than that, you got the loss against Renato Moicano, who's again another seasoned vet. He was very successful in defeating Karma Worthy, who's been all over the place out of the regional circuit and in the UFC. So yeah, I think that fight stylistically makes a lot of sense for Jai Herbert. Stop the fight, says Ash. So look, he's calling back to the Dan Hardy incident in the Trinaldo fight. He remembers that well. Let's see him versus Terence McKinney, says Breezy. Talking of Terence McKinney, yeah, you could see that. I mean, Terence McKinney probably sits above the likes of Otman Azaitar and John McDessie, I reckon, because he's fought a guy. Yeah, okay, I guess he's coming off of a loss against somebody who, was making their UFC debut. He did beat Matt Frevola, which I think was impressive, didn't Terence McKinney? But But then, yeah, I think Terence is a tough one. Lost against Drew Dober. Again, Drew Dober is somebody who's fishing for somebody who's top 15 competition now. So, yeah, Terence is a skilled fighter, very long, very rangy. So is Jai Herbert. Mate, that fight probably trumps, in terms of skill-wise, trumps the two picks that I've got. In terms of, like, where people are at in their careers, I like the John Modessi fight personally. But, yes, a top pick, Breezy. Smash a like on the video if you like that pick for Breezy. And, of course, if Terence McKinney comes over to London as well, we've got a bone to pick with him, because he did kind of stood us up a little bit. We were meant to have a Q&A with him a little while ago. So, yeah, I'm all for that fight, of course, as well. And I'm sure the ATF community would love to have a word with him. No beef, of course, no beef. But, maybe he could, just give it up to us a little bit and maybe do an in-person one. So, yeah, fingers crossed. Who knows? Let's move on to Jack Shaw. It's a fan favourite of our boy Angus, of course, who joined us during the UFC 286 watch-along, and he is our editor on our website. So shout out to Angus. Jack Shaw, then. Two great, solid matchups. I'm feeling very confident about this first one. Pat Sabatini for me, for Jack Shaw. Because Sabatini, he's got 11 submission wins on his resume. Jack Shaw has 9 submission wins on his resume. So you can really sell that one, in my opinion. You've got 17-4 for Pat Sabatini. Jack Shaw, I think, is currently on 17-1. So in terms of, the guys that people have been in there, competition-wise, level experience, these two pair up quite nicely. Pat Sabatini, of course, is coming off of a win against, a loss against Damon Jackson back in September as well. So maybe he's, again, someone who's due a fight, perhaps in the summer or April, because he's not booked at the moment. He did have a grappling match against Alex Caceres and won at Fury Pro Grappling. So he's been active. That was in December. But again, Pat Sabatini is quite a strong featherweight as well. And so's Jack Shaw. I mean, Jack Shaw looked he's pretty beefy. The fact that he was making bantamweight was pretty impressive. I'd probably give the strength advantage to Pat Sabatini in that bout. Sabatini's not quite got the level of wrestling that Jack Shaw's last loss against Ricky Simone. I wouldn't say that he's got that kind of level of wrestling, but his grappling is good nonetheless. So I think that makes sense in terms of fight-wise. We've got another Ash in the house, but we've also got Breezy who says he's just come off a nasty knockout. I think it was you were referring. He was referring to Terence McKinney. So, yeah, for sure. Ash, welcome in, buddy. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you're new to the channel. If you've not been in before, if you have been in before, let us know. Of course, good to know. Good, interesting to know. Has Craig got a fight? What about him with Rakic? I mean, we'll get into Paul Craig in a sec because I do think he will show up on the UFC London card in July. We'll get into that in just a sec, but we got some top level of competition. I've kind of put these fighters in order based on where I think they'll come on fight night. So when we start hitting into that main card sort of section, that's when we'll get in there. I mean, Jack Shaw could be on the main card nonetheless, but I think he likely will be maybe headlining the prelims. That's my guess. That's my wild guess. Ash says that France guy, Zaim versus Jai. Ooh, that is a nasty. Faraz Zaim is a good competitor, good lightweight. I'm really intrigued to see more of him. A great win for him in UFC Paris. Yeah, you could be right. Could be right. Styles make fights, and I think that's a good one as well. Again, another tall, long, rangy fighter. And he also says Damon Jackson versus Jack Shaw. Yeah, I was tempted to throw that one in there. I was tempted, but I wasn't sure what the UFC would do with Jack Shaw now. Because, of course, Damon Jackson's coming off a loss against a ranked guy, so he's currently sitting just outside the rankings. Whereas Americani probably wasn't quite sitting just outside. I think the UFC might want to give Jack Shaw another level up fight. Maybe someone who's got a lot of wins under their belt, not falling on hard times. Because I think Americani was falling on hard times, really. His recent record hasn't been great. So maybe perhaps the next step would be someone just outside the rankings, but who's racked up quite a lot of wins. Book it, says Ash, and Breezy says Billy Quintillo. He's currently booked. It's a good fight, but I think, Quintillo's looking for kind of ranked guys. The fight against Barboza, I think, is going to be a difficult one for him. I'm not sure if he's going to get past Barboza. I think a lot will be said about Barboza, I think, in the Billy Q fight. I don't want to count Billy Q out or anything, but if Barboza does lose to that, you got to start thinking about retirement options, I'm afraid. And that's my opinion. That's just my opinion. Of course, love to watch Barboza as always. But the other option I've got for Jack Shaw is somebody who fought this past weekend because it makes sense timing-wise. Coming off a second round submission victory against Tucker Lutz is indeed Daniel Pineda, who's somebody who's been in there against top competitors. He lost against Cub Swanson prior to the Tucker Lutz fight. He got demolished by Cub Swanson, actually. But he's beaten the likes of Herbert Burns, who's a good grappler, of course, as well. Again, we're pairing up similar grappling level guys. We've got Pineda, who's got... I think I've got some of these wrong. 19 wins by submission. That's not right, is it? Oh, yeah, 19 wins by submission. That's crazy. I mean, he's 28-14. So he's got a beefy record. And if you want to give Jack some level of competition, Pineda is the guy, really. I thought for some reason I had in my head that he's lost more than that, but he's only had a few fights in the UFC. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no, 3. No, only 3. Sorry, Tapology gives you grappling in there. Who drew in grappling against Davey Ramos and Grant Dawson. So that just says... Oh, and no contest against Andre Fili, sorry. So, 4 fights in the UFC so far. Goes toe-to-toe against the likes of Grant Dawson and Davey Ramos in grappling. So, strong test for Jack Shaw. Not giving easy ones here. Ash says, been following you on Twitter for a while. Welcome in, buddy. Thank you for joining us, as always. Let us know about what you think about these matchups. If you haven't already, smack a like on the video. Yes, there is no UFC this weekend, so there won't be a watch-along. But we got some more content hopefully coming your way. So do make sure you've got the notifications bell rang on the channel as well. Whack a like, of course, yes, do what Sai says. Jamal Hill, thumbs, indeed, says Ash. Yes, that tattoo is horrendous. But yeah, I mean, they're my 2 options for Jack Shaw, Pat Sabatini and Daniel Pineda. Again, I think just headlining the prelims of the UFC Fight Night London, who I think will be showing up on the main card. Fingers crossed, of course. Main card debut would be Muhammad Mokaev. Of course, big question marks surrounding him at the moment and his knee because of that devastating knee bar that he was in at UFC 286. 2 names for him at the moment. Not sure about this first one. We did put a post about it the other day. We did write an article about it the other day as well. Is Matt Schnell, because he did call out Matt Schnell on Twitter and said, hey, you declined the fight last time out. You said you weren't going to be ready for the summer. Let's make it happen in London or even, in the US. But Matt Schnell did later, or he didn't say anything, but he did tweet that he, might have a fight booked. So my guess would be that Matt Schnell, that Mokaev boat that ship may have sailed, and perhaps Matt Schnell will be on a card towards the end of, maybe in May. My guess would be May. So who knows? But my other option for Muhammad Mokaev, I think, is a good competitor. Fucking Carp, says Ash. No, I think Carp's a good one. Carp's was ready to go, but I think Carp's probably going to get back in there. It's interesting to see if Alex Perez can get cleared. Maybe they can rebook that fight next month, or maybe in May. But my option actually is David Dvorak. Again, a European fighter from Croatia, 20-5. So a lot of competition in that guy. You would be throwing Makayev into the wolves a little bit here. Not necessarily, would you be building him up? But then he's been finishing guys. And he's really, really pushing to be the youngest UFC champion, and he wants to be champion by March next year. If you're going to give him that option, David Dvorak would be your guy to do that against somebody who's got a lot of experience. 8 wins on 8 knockouts on his resume, 8 submissions on his resume. Back-to-back losses, though. So there's the reason why you could give Makayev the fight. The fact he's lost 2 in a row against Mateus Nicolau, who's no slouch. He's on a run himself. And Manel Karp. The Karp loss was in December, so not that long ago. Does he feel like competing in the summer is the ultimate question. Because before that, he was on an absolute tear in terms of competition-wise. So, if he's calling for it, why not? But I think David Dvorak's in a position where he's not really got much of an option, really. Because you can't fight up, and a lot of people have been ducking Makayev, got to feel sorry for him about it. But Dvorak's one of those people in that flyweight division who's coming off of, 2 straight losses. Who else, really? I can't think. Maybe Schnell. Is Schnell coming back off two straight losses? I think he is. No, he's not. But he's 1 win in his last 3. And then other than that, not even Tim Elliott. I mean, Tim Elliott's booked against Alan Nascimento. Suma Daji, that's be fighting down. He's 1 spot below him, but he's, only lost once in his last 4. He lost against Matt Schnell, of course. Devastating fight for him. And he's a big flyweight as well. He would tower over Makayev. But other than that, you got, of course, Alex Perez. But he just pulled out of the Karp fight. So I think they'll rebook that Karp fight, which is the reason why I've not got Alex Perez in there. Makayev subs Karp in round 2, says Ash. Oh, I don't know. Karp's a strong boy. He really is. I think he's going to be difficult to submit. He really will be. And Breezy agrees he likes Karp as well. Brandon Royval says Breezy. Yeah, intriguing on the ground for sure. Brandon Royval is no slouch down there. Who's currently sitting at number 4, but he's currently booked against Mateus Nicolau. That's happening very soon, though. That's happening on the same card as Holloway versus Allen. So maybe indeed. Good shout. Makayev subs Yunnan, says Sai. Yep, indeed. Just give him the winner of Pantoja Moreno, says Breezy. Oh, you'd love to see it, wouldn't you? Can't see it, though, from the UFC. Let's move on, though. From Nathaniel Wood, I've got 2 options for him. Absolute barn burners, because Nathaniel Wood loves to bring it. He really does. He puts on a show. I think these tests are the best for him. Nate Landwehr, who just fought, even though Nate Landwehr did call out Evelev, who's in the rankings, currently undefeated, I don't think the UFC are going to give him that fight. I really don't. Evelev keeps getting chucked people who are unranked, and I think he deserves someone who's also ranked. And probably fighting up, really. Let's be real. But I think Nate Landwehr, Nathaniel Wood is a barn burner. Both guys are going to stand in the middle of an octagon, throw down. Who's going to win? I don't really know. I think Nathaniel Wood's probably got the better striking out of the 2. Nate Landwehr, grappling-wise, I'm not really too sure who would have the grappling edge, really, in that one. Maybe cardio-wise, Landwehr, perhaps. Difficult one to call, which is why you got to book it. And if you're the UFC, you know, these style of fights make all the sense. Ash says, I think they may give Nate a ranked opponent. No, I don't think so. I don't know. It's possible. You know, he puts on a shot. I think he's potentially one fight away, and I think the UFC have got to give him that fight, and which makes this one, and I've said this before, this next option makes the most sense. If you want to give him, this is the ultimate test. If you win this fight, then you'll get a ranked opponent, and that would be against Andre Fili, because he's been there against some of the best in the division. And I've said this before. I've even tweeted Nathaniel Wood about it as well. I think this fight makes sense. You know, Fili did pull out of a fight back in February due to an eye injury. Can't imagine it gets rebooked. I can't tell you who that was against. Who was that against? Again, that was against Lucas Almeida. on the 25th. Coming off a win, though, against Bill Alagio, split decision, close fight. Mate, I think that's a fun one for the fans as well. Andre Feely puts on a show, as always. Breezy says Lerone Murphy after the Twitter beef. Yeah, I'd be all for it. Yeah, there is a lot of Twitter beef there, of course. Friendly beef, I'd say. Murphy, Nathaniel Wood did poke the bear a little bit after the Murphy fight at UFC 286 because, it was a close fight. Some would have argued he should have lost that. And, even Nathaniel said, look, after that performance, it wasn't a great performance. I don't think you deserve to fight me. So, for that reason, I've not got him in there. But hey, they might try and rebook it. Who knows? But I'm all for all three of these options. I really am. Moving on then to the other guy that I've got on the card, Modestas Bukauskas. Got one option for him. He did call out Paul Craig, of course, after his last fight. I did ask him about that fight and how he matches up stylistically. I just don't think the UFC are going to make it. I just don't. For several reasons. I just kind of almost want to baby Modestas a little bit. Yeah, okay. He defeated Tyson Pedro, who was on a bit of a tear and was looking phenomenal. Defeated him convincingly in a decision. But I still want to wrap him in bubble wrap because of his knee, and, we get along with Modestas over here on the channel as well. So my pick for him would be Da Un Jong, who's coming off of losses. He's very tall, rangy, light heavyweight as well. We've got 11 knockouts, 2 submissions on his resume. Losses against Devin Clark and Dustin Jacoby. Tough competitors, of course, who've fought the who's who. But he did beat Kennedy Nzechukwu via TKO. So that's a good win under his belt. So I think these two stylistically match up really well for that reason. And hopefully Da Un Jong, the Korean, can make it over to London. I like Bryce Mitchell. No doubt he would get it. I think it's one about the Nate. Yeah, maybe against Nathaniel Wood, against striker versus grappler kind of scenario there. But Mitchell is currently booked. I've forgotten who he's booked against. Is it someone just outside the rankings? It's a good grappler as well, I think. I can't remember. Really, you want to protect him and give him a monster. Are you on about in terms of Da Un Jong? I guess you could call Da Un Jong a monster, but he's come off of 2 straight losses. No, I was on about, Modestas coming back into the UFC. I didn't like the Tyson Pedro fight and was hoping that he was going to get wrapped in bubble wrap then. So, Da Un Jong is my pick, in my opinion. Da Un Jong. Fingers crossed he can be on that card. Paul Craig, however, is my next person we're going to talk about. He would definitely, I want to say co-main event, but in recent UFC Londons, they have chucked in a non-UK co-main, haven't they? Last time out, we got Faziev versus Gaethje. Prior to that, we got Hermansson versus... Till was meant to be on that card, but we got Hermansson versus Chris Curtis. So, I think maybe perhaps we'll get 2 notable names, a bit more notable names on the co-main. No, not to say that Paul Craig can't co-main. I think he can, for sure. He's got support in Scotland. Maybe it's a little bit difficult coming off of losses. But the one pick I've got for Paul Craig, and I've spoken about this before on the channel, might have been in an Aftermath show. Yes, he's coming off of losses against Johnny Walker and Volkan Oezdemir. Johnny Walker one was nasty back in January. So why would he not take a fight against Dominic Reyes? Co-main event, UFC Fight Night London. Hello, Reyes is coming off of a knockout losing streak at the moment. Paul Craig is not known for his knockouts. Said this before. Why not book it? Makes sense. You got a grappler versus striker. Dominic Reyes is a bit more of a striker. He's very tall, rangy as well. Why not? Book it. I think the UFC should give Reyes a bit of a solid. It's a chance for, Reyes does hit quite hard. He did go 5 rounds with John Jones. Okay, the excuses are all there. We'll side that for now. But, he felt that he won that fight. Since then, they've been giving him absolute killers. Why would you not give him someone who's not known for their punching power? Makes sense. I think the UFC need to make it happen. But, of course, again, it depends on time frames. It depends on when people want to jump back in there, really, doesn't it? But this is kind of all hypothetical. But before we get into, of course, what the main event was going to be, like I said earlier, I don't think Paddy Pimblett's going to be on the card. I don't think that Gunnar Nelson will be in the card for some reason. I hope he is, but for some reason, I've got a gut feeling he only fought once last year. He's fought once already this year. Who knows what's going to happen to Gunnar? And they might even just save him for a pay-per-view, perhaps in Vegas. That's my opinion. Again, maybe he could sit out and be on the same card as Conor when Conor comes back, potentially. Could happen. But let's get into the main event, of course. Tom Aspinall was 12-3 at the moment. Will probably most likely fight Marcin Tybura. My guess is that contract has been signed. I think we're just perhaps maybe waiting for the news to come out. It could be a matter of days. Maybe they're holding back on it a little bit. Maybe the UFC might want to announce the London card next month. Might be a little bit too early after UFC 286, especially when those tickets gave a lot of people a lot of heart attacks. So, let that kind of die off a little bit. And, I think the UFC will probably, fingers crossed, the tickets won't be as expensive as the pay-per-view. Okay, it doesn't really make sense to have the same price for a fight night. But, as for that main event, which I think is the only real option, let's be real. Yes, James MMA, boom, made it in. UFC London again. He says, yes, my man, you've missed majority of the show. But don't forget to, of course, go back and rewatch some of the bits that you've missed, some of the matchups that we've just gone over, some really, really dicey matchups and people that we want to see on this card. But we're just going to get into breaking down the Aspinall versus Tybura fight, because that's going to happen. I'm 90% sure it's going to happen. But of course, who knows? For me, my prediction would be a second round finish for Tom Aspinall. Yes, he did defeat Alexander Volkov in the first round by submission. And if you do your MMA maths, of course, which never really makes sense, but we do it anyway, Volkov beat Tybura. And you can see where this could be a bit of a gimme fight for Aspinall. Coming off of injury. It potentially is. But the reason why I've got second round is I think that Tybura has got some levels of strength for this heavyweight division. So I've got to give him some credit. I can't just completely knock him down. So I think he's going to be difficult to submit. In fact, I don't think he's even been submitted in his career at the moment. So, I don't think it's going to be an absolute cakewalk for Aspinall in the first round. Really. I guess you can look at the fact that Tybura did lose against Augusto Sakai, and Sakai rushed him and defeated him within 1 minute. So, of course, Tom Aspinall could easily do the same. But I think it's going to be the game plan of Aspinall, which is the reason why it's going to go to the second round. I think Aspinall will probably start maybe light, because he is coming off of a devastating injury. So I think he's going to probably be a little bit tentative early on. I think he's going to pick apart the body of Tybura, similar to what Volkov did as well. Really wear him down that way, especially gas tank wise. Then I think he'll execute the takedown and get him out there via TKO in that second round. That's my prediction. I struggle to see his submission. If he pulls off the submission, then it's going to be like, okay, wow, we really need to give Aspinall his props, because he just submitted a guy who's not been submitted. And the guys that, of course, Tybura has fought and not being submitted against. Ben Rothwell's got some underrated ground game. Maxim Grishin's quite good on the ground. Spivak, of course, has got a few submissions under his resume. He took Tybura to a decision. Abdurahimov laid on him and TKO'd him. He went 5 rounds against Fabricio Verdum, so Verdum couldn't tap him out. And we all know how good Verdum's on the ground. Arguably one of the best jiu-jitsu guys we've seen in the heavyweight division. So you've got to give props to Tybura in that respect, which is why I think it's going to be a TKO victory for Tom Aspinall. Let me know what you think in the chat, guys. Do you think that's a spot-on prediction? Give us a thumbs up on the video. Let your predictions be heard before we wrap this show up. James MMA says, Big Tom is back. Yes. Can't wait for Tom to be back in the mix. Yeah, I mean, we all want to, of course, the guys in the UK want to see him fight for the belt. We want to see him fight the top level or top echelon of the division. it was gutting that we didn't get to see how well he'd do against the Curtis Blades. You know, it was a freak injury. He went through a leg kick, his knee popped, TKO, that's it. You know, we didn't get to see much on the feet at all. In fact, it's probably the first strike being thrown. So I do hope they run that back. There's a lot of questions to be answered from Tom Aspinall's point of view, especially how he does against a wrestler. You know, can he submit a wrestler in Curtis Blades or even like a John Jones? Can't wait to see Tom knock out Jones, says Breezy. Oh, big mountain to climb, of course. Do hope that they do meet down the line. I say we can't wait for Tom to be back as well, man. Yeah, and I mean, look, this is probably part of the reason why the UFC are coming back to London. We'd all be wishful thinking and maybe perhaps that that they'd bring another pay-per-view back. One name that I didn't mention of the people who won't be there, I think, is Leon Edwards. And I don't think he'll be fighting, but I think he'll be in the crowd. You know, I don't think he'll be fighting at all, to be honest. I think that it'll be a pay-per-view that he comes back for. I can't see. We can't be that greedy, can we, here in the UK? We can't have 2 pay-per-views in a calendar year, but in the UFC. All right. So for that's for my reason. All right, guys, excellent work in the chats as always. This has been your news show. This has been your UFC London kind of bit of a breakdown of who he wants to see. 90% Club, join the 90% Club. Hit your likes on the video, of course. Hit the subscribe buttons if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notifications bell as well. I've been your host, JK, and we'll see you later on in the week for more content, and we'll see you at the next watch along next week for the pay-per-view, big pay-per-view, UFC Miami, Adesanya versus Pereira. So don't forget to tune in for that. All right, guys, take care. Good night. Ciao for now.